Hello and welcome back. This is part 3 of 5 on career discernment, the what, why, and how. Again, my name is Beth Godbee, the presenter and facilitator of these series of videos. And in this third video, we're going to take up the question of why. Why does career discernment matter? As I hope became clear in the second video when I shared a few stories of how folks approach career discernment, there are a few key guiding principles that we can use to guide or direct the process. In this video, I'll share 4 of those principles, and the fourth really looks at the question of commitments, or what are the deep dedications and values, priorities that can guide the work. So I'll share the 4 principles and then end by inviting all of us to write a commitment statement and to use that commitment statement to guide the process. So let's dive right in. So as I think about guiding principles that really answer the question of why does this work matter, I want to begin by sharing that the work is lifelong and ongoing. Career discernment is something that happens again and again and again over time. I know in higher education we sometimes have a narrative, I would argue a dominant narrative, that we do initial job placement or figure out career questions early, often in graduate school, and then set it aside. We've done that work. But the reality is that we come back to career questions many times throughout our life, that there's always new questions emerging about where to put time and attention. And that if we have a process and practices we can turn to, then we'll know better how to make decisions both on a daily basis and over time. So again, this first principle is simply that career discernment is lifelong and it's ongoing. So it does help to have a process to turn to again and again. The second principle is that this work involves questioning. Few questions will proliferate many more questions, and that the more you can be open and in a place of curiosity to turn to questions, the more the process can evolve from that place of questioning. So let me just read some sample questions. So what's the work that you're called to do? What feels especially urgent at this time for you personally, for all of us collectively? What fuels or inspires you? Alternately, what drains your energy? To whom am I accountable? What influences have brought me to this point, to the decisions I'm facing now? And what contributions and impact do I want to make in my career? What must I do to be aligned with my life's purpose? So these are just some sample questions, and what I hope that they indicate is that the questions will keep spiraling. There's a practice called 5 whys that I think could be helpful, which is as soon as you write down a statement, the work I'm called to do is, and you write down a statement, then you ask the question why. And then you ask the question why again, and you ask the question why 5 times so that you tunnel down through a process of questioning just to keep getting more and more curious about the assumptions that are coming into the process, your expectations, internalized conditioning, what's driving the process. So the second principle really points to the importance of questioning. The third principle is that the process is messy. And I know we sometimes go, messy, discomfort, potentially conflict-driven. But if you can be open to messiness, I think it can indicate that there can be an openness to the process. So instead of having a straightforward linear line, we can think of this as circuitous, iterative. The process often involves shifting and shaking up everyday life, redefining what we think our life's work is or the kind of positions that we were interested in, certainly countering oppressive social conditioning and institutional structures. So there's a real liberatory potential in the work. And setting boundaries, learning ways of saying yes and no. There's a lot that can get redefined in the midst of the mess. I will say, therefore, that the process can unravel a lot, and I think we heard this in these stories that I shared in the second video in terms of the career direction changing quite significantly, or in terms of having to make choices about where differently to put energies. But that being said, the mess it can involve and can invite a lot of openness with digging into emotions as well as thought patterns of behavior. It can help us think through our personal relationships with money and time and resources. It can invite questions of conditioning, as well as the material conditions we need to sustain and support us. And it can help us uncover narratives that we're carrying that many times we're ready to shake off let go of, release, redefine, rewrite, and to write new scripts for ourselves. So it's about career, and it's about much more than career. And again, this is why I'm calling it very messy, that the boundaries of the work can spill into all of our life. The fourth principle then, and this is the one I'll focus on most, is that the process really invites us to get clarity about our commitments and to use commitments to guide or direct the process. So commitments are about our values or what we care about, but they're specifically about how we act on our values, what motivates us to action. So if you think about commitments, and when you've colloquially heard of this term before, you might think about signing on to a contract or saying that you'll follow through with something. Commitments really are what you care enough about that you're willing to make a pledge or have an undertaking or have follow through to make actionable and build your life around the values, what matters to you most. So instead of just asking what are your values and how you use your values to guide your career, I'm asking us to shift to this language of commitments so that we're able to really tap into what's guiding and what will lead to action in career, out of career, as everyday decision making, in and out of work. I think commitments can help us think about where we put our time and where we don't put our time, and what actions we're called to do, just our day-to-day task list, and what we're not doing. In the same way, who are we relating with? Where are we living? What are the kinds of things we're seeking in a job, in a position, and what are the no's? And you'll hear me talk in the fourth video about the relationship of yes and no, and the commitments can start that conversation of what's a yes for us, what's a no for us, and knowing the difference between those two. So I have a handout for you to download and to print out and to work with. It's called Writing a Commitment Statement. I have some instructions, and then I share my own commitment statement and then give space for you to spend time. But the basic instruction is to think about what would you include, write down as your own commitments. Now, these can include, I'm really dedicated to my family. I'm really dedicated to staying in a local area. I know that for me, these sorts of things are non-compromisable. These are non-negotiable. It could even be points like I've had this kind of work before and it's close, not this for these reasons. And sometimes we have to write around commitments until we come into what matters to us most and what's going to guide or direct, motivate our everyday living. What I suggest is drafting it, knowing that it's going to be a draft, that it won't be the final version of a commitment statement, but getting started on a draft so that you can come back and revise it again and again. Having a draft will help you start to see with some clarity about what you've articulated and again, what's not articulated, and to get curious about what you have not written down. I think it can help to look for the patterns that you begin to see in your own articulation of commitments. So are there some themes or some repetitions that you can circle around? You could even do color coding, like ethnographic coding, get curious and excited and work with your own commitment statement to see what's there. It can also look at what surprises you in your commitment statement. So as you start to draft and revise your commitment statement, what do you notice emerging as most salient? What surprises you there? How well aligned do you feel with your commitments today? And where might there be a gap or a distance in alignment? And you can think about that alignment in terms of your personal life and, of course, professional life and career decisions. What might be missing or not yet represented among your commitments? Maybe something that you actually do have a value to, but you haven't made a commitment yet. And what would it take for you to translate the value into commitment that you would take action based on? What's important but unacknowledged? In total, what might these commitments be asking of you? So spend time with this commitment statement before moving to the fourth video, because of the principles, the guiding principles we've talked about here in this part 3, I think that commitments guide career discernment. This is probably the most important. It tells us that we need to know a lot about ourselves and what we're willing to show up for. What do we care enough about that we're going to show up and do the work around and be motivated to take action based on? You'll notice too across these 4 principles that there's a lot of both and energy, that dialectical tension, that things are both messy and directed. They're both commitment-based and emergent. They're drafty and in a process of getting clarified all the time. So if you can kind of with a sense of humility and a smile, know that we're going to be in this both and dialectical space. Certainly career discernment work, when I think about why it matters, it's so life-giving, it has so much clarifying potential, and it also can be really shaking up for your life, potentially in all the best ways, but that mess is part of the story. Hopefully career discernment helps you get down to the roots of your life, the roots meaning the commitments, and the roots meaning what you need to be grounded to grow. And I hope I've begun to answer the question of why career discernment matters. It matters as a lifelong process. It matters to help us get clarity on our questions. It matters to understand how our commitments can guide and motivate us. But I also want to invite you to keep thinking for yourself, why does this matter? And potentially to do some free writing about why you think career discernment matters for you at this life stage, at this point in your graduate studies. So I'll see you over in the 4th video. The next one gets into practices, and I look forward to digging into that. Thanks again.